My wife and I are both executives at a famous company. A middle school graduate like you should leave. Michael's spiteful voice echoed through the lavish wedding venue. The room, which had been filled with cheerful conversations, suddenly fell silent. Even in a place like this, he finds a way to look down on me. What a terrible person. I was dumbfounded. I took time out of my schedule to come here, and this is the attitude I get. Seeing Michael's overly rude behavior, I made a decision. And for Michael, a shocking twist awaited. My name is John, and I'm 35 years old. Let me share a bit about my tumultuous life so far. I was born and raised at my grandparents' house. My mom moved in with my grandparents after divorcing my dad and gave birth to me. But my mom was frail and passed away shortly after I was born. So, I grew up without either of my parents. That doesn't mean I was unhappy, though. My grandparents showered me with love, raising me with all the care they could give. They gave me an allowance so I wouldn't have to worry about money, and took me wherever I wanted to go. Thanks to them, I grew up with a lot of love. I wanted to make my grandparents proud, so I studied hard. The harder I studied, the happier my grandparents were, always encouraging me. Initially, I studied hard for my grandparents, but eventually, I grew to love studying and consistently ranked at the top of my class. Because of this, my homeroom teacher, Mr. Thompson, saw great potential in me. My grandparents told me, "You can go to any school you want and pursue any career you like. Don't worry about the money." But they were getting old and couldn't work forever. If I went to college, their lives would become more frugal. I didn't want to bother my beloved grandparents any further, so I decided not to go on to study. When I announced I would start working right after graduating from middle school, everyone around me was in disbelief. "You can study without going to school." I kept telling myself that as I entered the workforce. My first job was at a major restaurant chain. Having never worked in customer service, I was initially bewildered. I didn't even know how to greet customers. But my manager, Emily, taught me everything from scratch. From basic greetings to taking orders, she taught me everything. Emily was married and her oldest child was my age, so she treated me like her own son. Even when a customer complained about my service, she comforted me gently. Everyone struggles at first. "It's okay, you'll get the hang of it," little by little. Emily's presence was a tremendous support for me. I would come home exhausted every day. Seeing my condition, my grandparents worried about me as if it were their own problem. "John, you've always been pushing yourself too hard. You need to learn to rest better. We got you a new pillow, try sleeping with it. Hopefully, it will help you recover. Look, I got your favorite sweets. Let's eat together." My grandparents did everything they could to cheer me up when I was tired. Thanks to everyone's support, I gradually got used to my job and reached where I am today. However, a dark cloud loomed over my peaceful life with the arrival of a certain individual. One day, I was preparing for lunch at work as usual. Then, a group of businessmen walked into the restaurant. They came to our restaurant during their lunch break, and their voices echoed loudly throughout the place. Quite a lively group, I thought to myself. Just then, I was called over to their table to take their order. As I approached their table, I noticed one man staring at my face intently. However, as I took their order and was about to leave the table, one of the men said something unexpected. "Hey, aren't you John from North Middle School?" "It's me, Michael." "Michael? No way." I was speechless. Seeing my silence, Michael continued speaking. "Don't you remember? We used to compete on test scores." I never competed with Michael on test scores. That was something he did on his own. I remember Michael very well. I could never forget him. Because Michael had always treated me like a poor person, looking down on me for being raised by my grandparents. "Oh, I remember you," I replied. Michael laughed. "I heard you didn't even go to high school. You used to get scores close to mine, but in the end, you couldn't go anywhere because you were poor." Michael's colleagues joined in the laughter. Who graduates with just a middle school degree these days? I agree. I wanted to leave that table immediately. But I couldn't just walk away. I tried not to show it, but my emotions must have been evident on my face. Michael noticed and started to provoke me. What's the matter? Got something to say? You can't, right? A middle school graduate like you can't stand up to a prestigious university graduate like me. Michael laughed loudly. I hurried back to the kitchen. Emily, who had seen the whole thing, looked at me with concern. Who is that man? He's incredibly rude. Emily was furious. He's always been like that. He used every opportunity to look down on me because I was raised by my grandparents. Even as an adult. He's no different from when we were in middle school. Emily's face contorted with anger. Yes, Michael had always had it out for me. I know why. It started when we first entered middle school. While other kids attended cram schools and studied hard, Michael was one of them. He had attended cram school since he was little and was a standout in class. But I couldn't ask my grandparents to pay for cram school, so I studied alone at the library. When I ranked first in our grade, everyone was surprised. John, you nearly aced every subject. And you didn't even go to a cram school. That's amazing. My classmates praised me. Michael watched from the corner of the classroom, looking frustrated. From that moment on, Michael's attitude towards me visibly worsened. John, what trick did you use to cheat on the test? Every time there was a test, Michael accused me of cheating. It must have been because he couldn't stand losing to me. Of course, I never cheated. But my classmates were too scared of Michael to stand up to him. I endured Michael's harassment until our classes changed in middle school. I shared this with Emily. Emily was furious, almost ready to breathe fire. He's just jealous because he couldn't beat you on the tests. It's unforgivable. It's all in the past, and I don't intend to dig it up again, so it's fine. Emily let out a big sigh after hearing my words. I could let go of being accused of cheating, but there was one thing I could never forgive. That was at our middle school graduation. My grandparents came to the ceremony with me since I had no parents. While the other classmates didn't say anything, Michael loudly mocked my grandparents. Hey, where are your parents? Your grandparents look so poor. I could tolerate anything said about me, but I could never forgive anyone for insulting my grandparents. Anger boiled within me. Just as I was about to shout at Michael, my grandparents, who were beside me, desperately stopped me. Ignore him. Raising your voice will only waste your time. My grandfather said this, holding my shoulder. My grandmother also gently patted my back. After the graduation ceremony, we left the venue without facing any of my classmates. Because of that incident, I never wanted to see Michael again. I never expected him to come to the place where I worked. Seeing my state, Emily said, "You don't have to go out to the floor while Michael is here." Not wanting to hear any more of Michael's insults, I took her up on her offer. I waited in the kitchen for Michael to leave. But a few minutes later, a loud voice came from the register. Hey! John! Are you hiding because you're scared of me? It was Michael's voice. His loud voice echoed through the restaurant. It was a truly spiteful voice. The other customers looked around, wondering what was happening. If this continued, it would definitely bother the other customers. Reluctantly, I headed to the register where Michael was. I'm not hiding. Could you please keep your voice down in the restaurant? I said this as I started to process Michael's payment. However, Michael started to get angry, perhaps not liking my words. Whether I keep quiet or not in this restaurant is my business. I spent money at this lousy place. Don't tell me what to do. How arrogant can he be? I couldn't hide my surprise. But Michael was still a customer here. I must not argue. I kept telling myself this, trying desperately to control my emotions. Seeing me stay silent, Michael raised his voice even more. By the way, I heard you were unemployed after middle school. Are you taking society too lightly? You should have studied hard like me and joined a top company. Then maybe I'll listen to you. Michael puffed out his chest as if to say he was the best. I couldn't understand how someone could live with such confidence. As I let out a big sigh, Emily stepped in to take over the register. Her expression was stern. I'll come back to eat here again. Michael and his group left the store, laughing. Like the calm after a storm, the store quickly became quiet. I couldn't shake my irritation. Emily looked straight at me. That man is the lowest of the low. Just ignore him. He's a pitiable person without a human heart. She said this and started cleaning up Michael's table. Emily was right. Looking down on others even as an adult is something only a terrible person would do. I just needed to focus on what was in front of me and get through it. I decided to treat Michael like a bad dream and forget about him. Eventually, peace returned to my life. I started to forget about Michael coming to the restaurant and looking down on me. One hot summer day, I was working at the restaurant as usual. The oppressive heat was sapping everyone's energy. It's really hot today. We'll probably be packed with people looking for a cool place to eat, Emily said, busying herself with preparations. I followed her lead and got the restaurant ready. When we opened, just as Emily predicted, the place quickly filled up with customers. Emily, the other staffs, and I were all bustling around. Just then, the door flew open. It's so hot. And this place is packed. Yeah, that's right. Michael and his colleagues walked in. There were plenty of other places to eat around here. So why did Michael have to come here? A headache started to form as the nightmare returned. I decided to ignore Michael. The restaurant was busy, and I didn't have time to deal with him. But then Michael got up and walked towards me. I was taken aback. What does he want now? Michael finally reached me. I averted my eyes and focused on clearing the tables. But Michael didn't care and threw shocking words at me. Hurry up and get us a table. We're busy and should be prioritized, Michael said, clearly annoyed. But there were many customers who had arrived before Michael and were waiting for a table. Such selfish thinking wouldn't fly. The waiting customers looked at Michael with displeasure. Without hesitation, I said loudly, "There are people who came before you, Michael. We'll seat everyone in order, so please wait." Michael erupted in anger. Are you saying you'll prioritize these strangers over a former classmate? Michael's voice echoed through the restaurant. Hearing Michael's rude words, the customers looked displeased. Emily hurried over to see what was going on. What Michael was saying was like a selfish child's tantrum. Former classmate or not, it's common sense to wait for your turn, I said, and Michael let out a loud sigh. Then he glared at me. Common sense? Don't lecture me on common sense. You didn't even graduate high school. You were just an unemployed bum. I couldn't believe my ears. My education had nothing to do with Michael. I was fed up with him constantly bringing up my education to belittle me. Anyone could see that it was Michael who was lacking common sense. This time, I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't stand it any longer. Education has nothing to do with this. Everyone is waiting their turn, so you should too, Michael. Even after I said that, Michael just laughed. Just get us a table already. We're here on a work break, we're busy. These other customers are probably just wasting time. It's only right that you seat us first, since we're top company businessmen. Nothing I said would get through to him. At that moment, it became clear to me. I couldn't understand how someone could grow up to be as twisted as Michael. As I stood there speechless, Emily, who had been watching, raised her voice. Sir, if you can't follow the rules, you'll have to leave. You're disturbing the other customers. Michael's face turned red upon hearing Emily's words. Michael's colleague, standing next to him, nudged him with an elbow. Michael, let's just go. It's not worth it. But Michael wouldn't back down and even started to confront Emily. You dare to defy me? I'm not so low as to be ordered around by an old woman like you. Get us a table now. Other customers were staring at Michael. With the commotion reaching this level, I was at a loss. Though it went against my principles, I thought the only way to calm things down was to seat them first. Just as I was considering this, the waiting customers began to speak up against Michael one after another. Aren't you embarrassed to call yourself an adult and not follow basic manners? Do you think throwing a tantrum will get you seated first? That's something only a child would do. Michael hadn't expected such words from the customers. He fell silent immediately. Seizing the moment, Emily and I ushered Michael and his colleagues out of the restaurant. We apologized to the other customers for the disturbance. One customer smiled and said, "It's tough having customers like that." We managed to resolve the situation, but I hoped never to experience it again. I decided that if Michael came back, we would refuse him entry. I made up my mind at that moment. But since that incident, Michael never returned. Several years passed, and I was now 35. Time flies. That day, I took off work to attend a wedding. At this age, I was often invited to weddings. It seemed like I attended a wedding every month. As for me, I had no plans to get married and wasn't seeing anyone. I thought maybe it was time to consider marriage, but I was too busy with work to date. Arriving at the wedding venue, I was impressed by the lavish entrance. I had attended many weddings, but this one was special. I honestly didn't want to attend, but I couldn't refuse a request from someone who had helped me a lot. After checking in at the reception, I entered the hall and saw a crowd. Feeling curious, I peeked and saw Michael in a tuxedo. Yes, I was at Michael's wedding. Of course, Michael hadn't invited me. I was attending in place of someone who couldn't make it. I knew it was Michael's wedding beforehand, and though I wasn't keen, I still attended. Michael was shocked to see me. "Why are you at my wedding? I didn't invite you," Michael shouted at me. But I was no longer afraid to respond. Knowing a certain truth, I no longer had to fear Michael. "No, you didn't invite me." "Then why are you here?" "I'll sue you for trespassing. My wife and I are both executives at a famous company. A middle school graduate like you should leave." Michael continued speaking arrogantly. His spiteful voice echoed through the lavish wedding venue. The room, which had been filled with cheerful conversations, suddenly fell silent. Then, the bride, Ashley, appeared in her dazzling white wedding dress. She looked at me with eyes full of suspicion. Michael, with a sneer, began to introduce me on his own. "Oh, this is my former classmate John." It's embarrassing to even call him a former classmate. He didn't even graduate high school and was supposedly unemployed. Ashley laughed at Michael's words. "Really? Someone like that is your friend?" "Of course not. He came here uninvited." Michael said this, laughing loudly at me. There was no way I would attend a wedding without an invitation. I was deeply irritated by Michael's foolish remarks. "Are you two really executives at a famous company?" When I said this, letting my emotions show, the two of them looked at each other and started laughing. "Oh yeah, doubting us, huh? Are you jealous? How rude of you." It was obvious who was being rude. I couldn't hold back any longer. "Funny, I don't remember promoting either of you." "What?" And that's when it happened. I heard a loud voice from behind me. Everyone immediately turned to the source of the voice. "John." It was Robert, an executive from the company where Michael worked. Robert seemed a bit shaken to see me there. Michael, puzzled, spoke up. "Robert, do you know this middle school graduate? He doubted us when we said we're top executives. What a worthless guy." As soon as Michael's words were out, Robert raised his voice. "Michael, how dare you speak so rudely? You have no right to act superior to this man." "What? Why? He's just a middle school graduate." Michael seemed confused. Ashley looked exasperated. Then Robert began to reveal the truth. "How do you not know? This man is the president of the Moore Group, which oversees 50 companies, including ours." "What? That can't be true. No way. He doesn't look like a president at all." Their blatant disrespect and audacious behavior left me speechless. Robert then revealed an even more shocking truth to them. John is the son of Joseph, the chairman of the Moore Group. Robert's words filled the venue with whispers and murmurs. "Moore Group? Isn't that the company that oversees all those famous businesses? So he's way above Michael in rank." Michael and Ashley looked at me in disbelief. I decided to reveal my true identity myself. Robert is right. I am the president of the Moore Group. I inherited the position from my father, the chairman. Michael looked unconvinced. You were working at a restaurant. There's no way you're a president. And your last name is completely different. Michael shouted, sweating profusely. That restaurant is part of the Moore Group. I was working there to learn about the restaurant industry firsthand, as part of my preparation to become the president. Also, I changed my last name to my mother's after my parents divorced. So, it's only natural that I have a different last name from my father's. Michael's face turned pale. Ashley was also silent. Yes, I am the president of the Moore Group, overseeing 50 companies. The reason I, a middle school graduate, became president is connected to my biological father. When I decided to work right after middle school, I struggled to find a job. Even high school graduates had a hard time finding employment, let alone someone with only a middle school degree. I was desperately job hunting every day. My grandparents, who were worried about me, watched me with concern. Seeing me struggle was hard for them. They contacted my biological father, whose contact information they had, and asked for his help. My father came to my grandparents' house right away. That was the first time I met my father. When he saw me, he hugged me tightly. We talked a lot that day. He told me he had tried to send money for me many times, but my grandparents had refused it. He also told me how he had watched me from a distance and wanted to work together someday. I can pay for you to go to high school or college, he offered. But my decision to work was not made lightly. My mind was set. Understanding my firm resolve, my father found me a job. That job was at the restaurant. I only revealed my identity to Emily, and she didn't treat me any differently because I was the future president. She taught me a lot about the restaurant business. It was during this time that I re-encountered Michael. Later, I succeeded my father as president when he retired. That's how I got here. My father was originally invited to this wedding, but he couldn't make it, so I attended in his place. That's when I saw the invitation and learned that Michael worked for one of my companies. Michael and Ashley finally seemed to understand that I was the president. Glancing at the two of them, I asked Robert a question. Are these two really executives? Straightening up, Robert began to explain. Actually, Ashley's father's company is a business partner of ours, and part of the deal was to promote Ashley and Michael. So, we recently promoted them to department heads. I learned this fact for the first time. Promoting people under such conditions is unacceptable. I raised my voice at Robert. I do not approve of their promotions. Revoke them immediately. Ashley, flustered, raised her voice at me. If you do that, my father will be furious. And we'll lose the business deal. She sounded concerned about the company, but it was clear she didn't want to lose her position. I could see right through her. So, I laughed. Everyone in the room was now focused on me. We'll be fine without your company's business. A company that could collapse over one deal wouldn't have grown this big. Besides, I don't want to deal with a company that makes such demands. Hearing this, Michael looked like he was about to collapse. Robert looked embarrassed. Ashley's father, who had rushed over after hearing the commotion, looked like he was about to faint. No, that can't be. We've dedicated ourselves to the Moore Group for so long. Our company depends on this partnership. Without it, we're finished. Ashley's father looked at me with pleading eyes. I don't care about that. If that's the case, don't make such ridiculous demands. When I said that, Ashley was stunned. Michael looked at me with wide eyes. So, we'll be demoted to regular employees again. Michael's weak words made Ashley sigh. Michael, I heard you were bossing your subordinates around because you were a department head. On top of that, you act arrogantly even outside the company. To be honest, you both are a disgrace to our group. Such people don't deserve to be department heads. When I said this, Michael exploded in anger. Why should I be treated like this by someone like you? You're just riding on your father's coattails. Being lectured by a middle school graduate doesn't bother me at all. Why did I have to endure his yelling? I couldn't understand it at all. Fine. I decided to reveal another truth to drive the point home. You haven't changed at all. Academic qualifications have nothing to do with work. There are people with degrees who still commit fraud at work. What? A moment of silence followed. Recently, there have been discrepancies in the company's finances. After some investigation, we found that funds were being withdrawn from your computer. Can you explain that? I spoke as calmly as I could. Michael started shaking visibly, clearly distressed. Robert looked shocked. Michael, is that true? Michael tried to control his trembling voice and responded quietly. Yes. I borrowed some money for the wedding expenses, but I was going to pay it back soon. I swear. Repay? You used company funds without permission. That's a crime. What were you thinking? Robert delivered a harsh remark to the trembling Michael. I'm sorry, John. Please forgive me. We're friends, right? Friends? There was no way Michael and I could ever be friends. I couldn't help but laugh at the idea. Michael and I being friends was as impossible as the sky falling. Friends never look down on each other. Didn't you look down on me, did you? Michael looked down and fell silent. He realized he couldn't argue anymore. We've never been friends. Even if we were, this act is unforgivable. If you sincerely apologized, I might have considered demoting you to a regular employee, but that seems unlikely. You're fired as of today. Fired. Michael collapsed to his knees. The lavish wedding venue was now filled with tension. Ashley, who had been watching silently, suddenly spoke words no one expected. I don't want to marry someone unemployed. This is all your fault. I'm not marrying you anymore. Ashley's voice was like a thunderclap, shocking the guests who couldn't hide their astonishment. I did all this for you. Don't say that. Michael was confused. But Ashley, not backing down, shouted back. For me? Are you saying this is all my fault? This happened because you didn't show respect to the president. Stop blaming others. The guests watched in silence. Ashley stormed out of the venue in anger. Michael tried desperately to chase her, but she was too quick. He collapsed at the entrance, crying pathetically. The wedding was called off, and Michael and Ashley's marriage was annulled. Afterward, I officially fired Michael for misusing company funds. Michael kept making excuses until the end, pleading to stay with the company, but I didn't pay him any attention. I knew if he returned, he'd repeat the same behavior. Moreover, someone who judges people solely by their academic credentials isn't needed in my company. On the other hand, Ashley couldn't bear being known as someone who was about to marry a fired employee. She suddenly resigned from the company. No one knows where she is or what she's doing now. As for me, I continue to work hard as the company president. Academic qualifications don't determine a person's worth. If you encounter someone who believes that having a high academic qualification defines a person's worth, please let them know that they are mistaken. My tumultuous life has taken a positive turn. From now on, I plan to continue moving forward in life, one step at a time.